OTB in 10, fantasy banter in 10 minutes or less or something. And we'll get right to it. So Garcia, another riveting week of football and fantasy football. In this case, it extended all the way to Tuesday, which has us recording on a Wednesday, which is exciting and new and different. We have just two teams now sitting at 4-1. One of those teams being Regulators, who continues to put up monumental point totals despite losing their quarterback midway through week number 5. So the question is, where is Regulators ranking to you now? Obviously number 1 in the power rankings, which we'll get to. Do you see Regulators as the team to beat in OTB?
Somebody who can basically put the jinx on any team out there as evidence of what Gronk has done in the last 2 weeks after predicting they would go undefeated. I'm going to go right out and say that Regulators is the best team and he's going to win it all this year because top to bottom, he's just got the perfect lineup. If you can withstand losing your quarterback midway through a game and still put up 129, 130 points, it goes to show you have a caliber offense that's just going to put numbers after week. And he's got what I think is the best waiver wire person, in some aspects on the bench and due to come back in the next few weeks. And McCaffrey, if I recall seeing that correctly. So he's got the secret weapon kind of holding on for another few weeks, and then he puts him in, and he's going to be unbeatable from here on out. I don't even know why we're playing anymore.
So, I mean, if you look at his lineup, what's funny is, look, I'm beating the same drum I've been beating for 3 weeks. I still favor Waivermen and wristbands. I still personally do. I think in the quad box that we've established thus far, at least through 5 weeks, where you have Waivermen, wristbands, Regulators, and Gronk, to your point, Gronk was the first team to blink. They had the devastating loss last week, and then this week, putting up low points. They're the first team to blink, which means that they're the first team to kind of move out of that pack. Not to say they can't jump back into it, but for now, it looks like a 3-team leaderboard. And within those 3 teams, I mean, look, Regulators doesn't have Chris Carson this week, doesn't have Christian McCaffrey for a few weeks, probably, maybe more. So that's part of why the lineup maybe doesn't look as dominating as Waivermen's or wristbands. But if you just look at the lineup right now, there's still some softness there. You got Devonta Freeman, you've got Cole Beasley, you've got Hollywood Brown. I mean, those are not consistent players week to week to depend on. It's working for them right now, and the question will remain how much of this has been propped up a bit by, over-indexing performances by Christian McCaffrey and by Dak Prescott earlier in the season, and how much of this will be sustainable throughout. I think we'll find out. I'm not sold yet, even though I know you are.
Presses about you probably know more players that are on the Regulators roster than actually Brian knows that's on the roster. So kudos to you on that. But again, I'm not going to jump just yet on putting the jinx on the likes of Carl and Chris. I'm going to wait for a few more weeks because I clearly have the magic touch when it comes to predicting teams are going to win it all. And right now I'm putting Regulators. I'm putting my money on Regulators to take it to the house, as they say.
Oh, it's good because I'm playing them this week, so it'd be nice if you were to put that jinx down. Speaking of me, I know it's a conversation.
Let's not get started about you. Because let's just face it, you are back. Okay, there's no undenying it. You are back, and I just you just start this segment.
Well, let me start the segment.
I cannot wait to get into this.
Sure. Well, it was
and I look forward to the comments after this.
It was a super rematch between our Super Bowl teams from last year. Now, in the last 4 games the Sweet Home Chicago and Sidebar has played, consider this. 3 of them have been decided by one of the final plays in the 4th quarter of Monday Night Football. It happened again this week. Sweet Home Chicago this time was victorious. Garcia, does the win, does the loss, does the game tell you more about Sweet Home Chicago or Sidebar in 2020?
One, I think it tells us a lot about Sweet Home Chicago and the fact that he's got to think about how he's going to replace Keenan Allen. If Keenan Allen's out for an extended period of time, now he's got a bye week coming up, so maybe he saves himself there where he already kind of knew going into week 6 that he wouldn't have Keenan Allen. But if you go beyond, and Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert have had such a great connection going on. So whoever's picked up Mike Williams, kudos to you in the last week. Whoever dropped Mike Williams, I'm not really sure why you would just get rid of a number 2 receiver on a team that quickly, knowing the fact that Keenan Allen has history of injuries. With that said, let's get into about you, because this really is all about you. It's constantly about you. And I just want to go ahead and thank the likes of Ian and Carl, who basically allowed you back into the setting, because for 4 weeks, going into week 5, you weren't going to be part of the storyline anymore. We had all the enjoyment knowing how frustrating, how annoyed you were going to be, how much you were going to hate this season because you were dead. We left you to be dead. We had this whole thing of like, here it is, the master last year, and now you're nothing. You were nothing. And they went and gave you a gift as if like, oh, this isn't really fun when Dave's not playing. Let him play. Give him the ball. Let him kick it. Stupid. It was dumb. I hope these guys actually lose from here on out because allowing you back in makes it worse for all of us because now you're even a bigger threat than you were before. And you were nothing. You were absolutely nothing. You even told me your team stunk. You stunk. And they gave you a gift. And I wonder, do these guys understand the fact that we don't take enjoyment out of winning the league? We take enjoyment out of seeing you in pain, in misery, because the text messages that started from week 1 to week 5 went from like back and forth to, that's where Dave hasn't responded in the last 3 hours because he's out gardening. He's out picking apples on a Sunday when we're all glued to our TV or our phones watching the game. Yet they, for some reason, felt like this isn't fun. Let's get Dave back in the game. So these guys have to understand that when it comes to voting next year on any new rules or any new things they want passed, or if they want to make trades in the future, other league owners are going to keep this in mind. And if they haven't yet, they haven't really put, A to B together. They should start thinking this way because the likes of Ian and Carl clearly don't understand our mission objective when it comes to OTB. And that is to make your life miserable because we don't want you to win.
Well, you heard it there. I mean, I don't know that I fully agree with all that. I think they were fair trades, and I think, both Waivermen and Sweet Home Chicago got value back.
Receivers were garbage. Your receivers were garbage. Garbage. You had nothing. You had nothing to get excited about. You even told me, like, my team stinks. This is the worst team ever. This is putrid. I mean, you took Daniel Jones in round 6, and we all like, what are you, crazy? Even we knew, Daniel Jones is garbage. Okay, you dropped him, okay? That tells you how bad you were with your draft. You had Josh Jacobs, you were like, he breaks tackles, He was garbage. Great, he had a great week against the Chiefs, which is fine. That's great, but it's not consistent. But your receivers, you couldn't even tell. No one knew who your receivers were. Now, come on, man. Come on. Everyone knew Kenyon Drake was garbage.
Well, look,
he scored a touchdown.
I
get it, but still.
Let me clear the deck. I will clear. I want to get to Sweet Home Chicago. I do want to get to Sweet Home Chicago because the story should have been more about him. But I will say this, as it relates to the trade,
it's about you. It's about you. This is the perfect situation because it's now brought the narrative back to you.
Here's what
we don't want.
All right, but here is what made sense for both teams. If you look at it this way, right now I think both Waivermen and Sweet Home Chicago were in a situation where they have some boomers. They needed some depth. Jonathan Taylor, David Johnson, Kenyon Drake are 3 players, at least from what I have seen thus far, and validated again this week, are somewhat touchdown dependent to have any semblance of over-indexing scores this year. I mean, maybe that will change, but when Jonathan Taylor's getting 10 carries a game, he's kind of a touchdown-dependent play. Kenyon Drake, let's just put aside. Even Sweet Home Chicago has acknowledged that that's kind of just an opportunity to see if this changes over the course of the next few months, because right now Kenyon Drake is whatever he is. And then David Johnson had a decent day against Jacksonville, but still isn't being used in the passing game as much as I think people would have expected, and still puts a solid floor together, 8 to 10, 12 points a week, but doesn't look like the kind of guy that is going to be able to give you the 15, 20, 25-point weeks. Maybe good for their lineups, especially Waivermen. Waivermen has depth all over the place. They've got boomers out the wazoo. They don't need necessarily to worry about a Juju Smith-Schuster who has a low floor and a high ceiling week to week. They probably want the 10 points from Jonathan Taylor every week, and they're fine about it. My lineup, as you suggested, I need some life. I need immediate life to have a chance, and so that's why the trades made more sense to me, as I've got guys now that have higher ceilings week to week. That said, Sweet Home Chicago could have been the story here, and I will say for Sweet Home Chicago, a very quiet Gardens Division defense campaign, I guess if you want to call it that. Not that they're leading the Gardens Division right now, but just the fact that they're in the playoff picture, well within the playoff picture now, both at 3-2 and in a good point situation. No one's really talking about them. They had this devastating loss in the Super Bowl, and I think there's still a lot of opportunity for them to make some noise this year. Both them and Shipwreck, maybe PTT, I don't know, we'll see, are 3 teams, two or three teams, that we haven't talked a ton about in these shows, but are just kind of lurking and have a lot of opportunity to maybe jump into that tier 1 in the next month or so. And I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it there because you said enough. We're going to move on. Because you know what? If you want to use the time for the next subject, talk about me again, you're more than welcome to. But this conversation is about Dynasty Thoughts. An interesting text conversation with you over the weekend has opened your eyes, it seems, even though you were already kind of on this bandwagon, to push OTB towards some more of a keeper or dynasty format. And so I would just cede my time, as they say on the Senate floor. I will give you my time. What do you want to say about a dynasty?
It's funny how you're going to see the time when you and this is the first time now in year 9, whatever it may be, that you utter the words. You know what? It might actually be a good idea now that I think more about it. Because as a way I positioned it to you, I said, look at some of the teams like you, myself, even Cincinnati, where we're in that brink of like, all right, we have to have teams come down to us because us going up to them is going to be a challenge due to some injuries and due to the garbage lineups that we're putting out there. Well, the exception to you. Not like Cincinnati and I really kind of are the teams that basically like, boy, our teams just haven't had any luck. We're beset by injuries. We've had some bad weeks in terms of scoring points. But when you think about it, the injury bug has hit us. Granted, I know PTT or not PTT, Regulators and Gronk and those guys like Barkley, and they lost McCaffrey, but McCaffrey's coming back. To me, it's like, well, imagine now if you have a dynasty league, you have the opportunity where Ian's not going to you and handing you Tyreek Hill. Carl's not going to you and handing you Juju Smith. They might be like, hey, let me look at teams that really kind of might have more options for me, such as myself or Cincinnati or some other squads that might be like, I just don't really have a great squad. How do I possibly dangle a piece like a Devontae Adams to wristbands who wants to win it all, to have some claim of fame in his life for the first time ever and say, you know what, I want to take something home. I want to have an actual championship and something to be proud of it, frame it in my wall, in my office, wherever it may be. And he could say, boy, I'm just missing one piece. And it might be Devontae Adams, or it might be, I don't know who Cincinnati has anybody left on his roster that's healthy. So it's one of those things where think about it, and it engages more conversation, engages more trade. Granted, wristband's probably the worst candidate to consider because he wants to give you a bag of potatoes for a top profile player. But at the end of the day, I think it brings a little bit more of that feeling of ownership and more of the gambler in some sense, where, we're kind of not just throwing names out. We're really looking at a long range picture, maybe 2021, 2022. You even said, yeah, I probably would not even have thought of trading Jonathan Taylor because I'm always a year or two ahead of myself when I select players. So think about that notion of the fact that you might stink now, but you could be great for year after year after year after year. That's the mindset we need to have in this league. And going back to the whole trade with you and Sweet Home Chicago, I forget who you traded David Johnson to.
It was Sweet Home Chicago.
I told you point blank, I said, if I'm a David Johnson owner, I'm getting rid of this guy ASAP. You know why? Because Deshaun Watson doesn't have any receivers to throw to, and they're going to put 11 guys up in the box. And you're like, yeah. And right there, I'm pretty sure you were shopping that guy around. So I'm not going to tell you anything anymore.
All right, well, I'll take it one at a time. As it relates to the Dynasty League idea, I think I would have liked it last year a little more than this year. Although, to your point, you're right. I would have reconsidered the trades.
Lamar's garbage this year.
Well, still, the upside for Lamar, relative to the draft position last year and the idea that you can keep him. Maybe there's some hybrid approach. Maybe there's 2 or 3 or 4 players. I know you had mentioned that too. Maybe it's not a full Dynasty lineup. Maybe you just have an extended keeper league. Look, I argue it on either side. You've heard me argue it on the side against. The side against being I enjoy shuffling the deck every season, having a new opportunity to evaluate players and select a completely new team each year to demonstrate the very many different ways you can win fantasy football each and every year by your lineup and draft strategies. That said, yeah, there's something that is interesting about the idea of having a longer range plan. We don't see a lot of trades in OTB. Would we see more trades if there were opportunities for players to look into the future, trade draft capital, trade players like a J.K. Dobbins or a Jonathan Taylor, players that may not, go crazy this year. Maybe we're 1 year too early on them. But to that point, next year would be massive. So all of a sudden there's upside, and maybe somebody wants to trade, a guy that in the moment it can help them win for it. So yeah, I think that's interesting, and I look forward to the conversation when it's on the ballot and everyone is discussing it, because to me, I do think there's something interesting about it, even though I don't know a full dynasty league still appeals to me.
Here's the other thing, too, is because we're adding more flex positions and adding more bench spots and doing away with defenses and kickers, as you can see on that waiver wire, it's very difficult to really salvage anything on your lineup these days. And proposing trades could be the way of really kind of making that work, and having that dynasty mentality of the format, I think could only enhance that experience. So yes, I'm all for having a hybrid approach and have it, maybe it's 4 roster spots or 6, to that nature. Happy to explore that. Clearly, if Carl or Ian propose it, I'm not going to vote in favor of it.
I'll tell you.
I will have my own, bill, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's competing dynasty league. Competing dynasty.
Where those who vote for me will see a nice little stipend in an envelope on their desk when voting time comes around.
Oh, sure. Well, let's move over to power rankings, not a ton of movement this week, but we do see that Regulators reclaims the top spot. WB, Waivermen move up. Gronk moves a little further back after a disappointing week 5. And then, kind of spot 6 to 12, more or less the same. PTT starting to show some movement, as is All Aboard the Baby Bus. Great show on paper, of course, having both the Aaron Jones bye week and the Nick Chubb injury kind of hampering their week 5 opportunities. Garcia, anything striking you here in the latest edition of the Power Ranks?
Couldn't be any funkier seeing wristbands atop a division and a number 1, number 2 seed, whatever it may be. It goes to show you that 2020 is truly off the rails. So I'm afraid of what we're going to see these next few months. But no, I think it's interesting you kept yourself last.
How could I not? How could I not? I'm last in points, and 2 and 3.
You got more points than me this year.
No, you've got more points. You've got last week. But look, I still have a hole to climb out of.
But your roster just got enhanced.
Maybe
tenfold.
You
got 2 bona fide receivers. You got rid of garbage running backs who, their ceiling has been met. So you're back. Let's face it.
I wouldn't go that. I wouldn't go that far.
Your team name should be "You Are Back."
So here's a couple of interesting things. The email will reference this too, but here's a couple of interesting things. Wristbands has never been ranked number 1 in the power rankings or number 1 overall in the league ever.
In anything. It doesn't.
This is big because we could be 1 week away, depending on the outcome of this week. That's the first thing for WB. The second thing for WB is a lot of people probably forgot this because there's about 1 million different news cycles every 3 hours, both in football, fantasy football, and the world these days. But there was a new fun-ish little stipulation to our knockout game and or to just kind of separate with our in-season challenge, that the first team to win 5 straight games in 2020 would have the opportunity to either cash out right away, $25, or improve their knockout chances. WB is over there with 4 straight victories. So this could be
an interesting point. So if he wins 5 in a row, who did he lose to begin the season?
I don't remember for certain. It might have been you.
Oh.
But that's a distant memory now.
Interesting.
Because he is 4-0. We were 1-0 at that point. He was 0-1. Since then, he's gone 4-0. We've gone 1-3. So we don't really want to talk about it.
Listen. Everybody looked at you as a bye week going into last week, and now that the trade happened, it's not like that anymore. And again, there's going to be a lot of owners, I'm sure, that I hope will keep this in mind when it comes down to whether they face, Sweet Home Chicago in the future and Waivermen. I'm certainly marking down my matchups on the calendar for the foreseeable future when I face those guys, because this is something I will never forget.
I will say, we're way over, but when we were last, kudos to the Waivermen.
We're always over.
All right, so here's one thing that I've noticed, obviously, because it happens to me as well, and I'm sure other people have noticed this too. Typically, teams that are doing better aren't usually as interested in trading, right? There's a little bit of I don't know if you want to call it recency bias, but they're kind of stuck, almost present bias. They're like stuck in the moment they're in. They can't envision a world where anything could ever change. They don't necessarily see the threats on the horizon in their lineup. And, I don't know if you've had this experience. I have. When I try to talk to teams that are on the up and up, they, typically offer what I would call one-sided trades, as if to say, like, they've got all the power. You, lowly team down here, don't have all the power. In reverse, a lot of times when you talk to teams that are obviously a little more desperate, you're going to get a little bit more reasonable trade conversation. I will just say kudos to Waivermen, who, regardless of where they're at, I know they're 2-3, but they're at the top of the leaderboard relative to points. I think they're one of the strongest teams in the league. You can hit up the Waiverman today, and he will still talk to you about any player on his roster. Everybody is tradable, and I know we kind of poke fun at some of his trade conversations sometimes because he's always in it. I say kudos to him for always being in it because I think that's the mark of a great franchise, that they understand the unpredictability of this game. They don't just sit and say, oh, I scored 130 points this week. My team's great. No, they look and they say, okay, here are the threats on the horizon. What can I do to make my team better? I don't think there's a lot of teams, admittedly. I would even put myself in that category in terms of like I don't think I have that foresight sometimes. I get stuck in my own success. I think there's a very few number of teams that actually do that in the league. And Waiverman really is one of the only ones that comes to mind, honestly. That's it. You got nothing for that. I was giving him a compliment.
That monologue you just did there about Waiverman, I mean, that is right there a clear indication of the fact that even you just swooped in the deal of the year by taking Juju Schwisser and getting rid of whoever you did. Who'd you trade him for?
It was Jonathan Taylor. It was Jonathan Taylor.
Jonathan Taylor. Oh, yeah, Jonathan Taylor. Okay. See, point in case. You now just wanted to kind of just brush Waiverman's ego. Good job. I see what you're doing.
No, I'm not. I really believe
you're doing. See what you did. I mean, don't even give me that, dude. Don't, whatever. Yeah, kudos to Waiverman for not having any type of love for his players and saying, "Oh, I can't get rid of this guy." Whatever. Come on, man. It's fantasy football. Don't give me that.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's rare.
I mean, yesterday we had a conversation about swapping our number 1 picks overall.
It was true. No, okay. I
would say, and I quote when I say Josh Jacobs, he's broken the most tackles.
Okay, no, look.
I mean, that's your stat.
Here's what I'll say. Here's what we'll end with. There are 1, 2, 3-ish, probably 1 or 2 teams that are described the way I describe Waiverman, whereas they're always willing to have trade conversation. I would say there are probably 4 or 5 teams in the middle that are more than willing and usually pretty fair and reasonable in their trade conversations. And then there are 4 teams, I'd say, I think about in my mind, that are untradeable with. In the history of OTB, I don't think you'll ever see them ever pull off a trade. And you would think to yourself at some point, if you're one of those teams, it's interesting, I've never pulled off a trade in 9 years. I wonder why that is. It must be because of my astute negotiating skills. It must be because I'm so good at negotiating that nobody wants to negotiate with me. Maybe there's something intuitive or introspective, I should say, that you should look at that maybe changes your dynamic on your trade conversation. That's all I'm going to say.
So what you're saying is you and I will never make a trade together because 1, I don't trust you, and 2, I don't want to trade with you. And here's the thing. Let's say we even made that trade, okay? Josh Jacobs for Devonta Adams.
Sure.
Now you have 3 receivers where you had none before.
Yeah, but
you had nothing.
But I'm starting Duke Johnson as my RB1 in that situation. So it actually does have some merit. I got half of Devonta Adams. He's got a half of a leg right now. So, that trade's still out there, by the way. Just for the league to know, that trade's still out there. I'm interested in that trade. So just know that's a thing.
Jacobs and Devonta Adams?
That's the one.
Only has Devonta Adams.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying I would do Josh Jacobs for Devonta Adams today. I would do it today.
So what you're saying is you should have Carl reach out to me to get Devonta Adams, and then he swaps. It's an interesting tactic.
Yes.
Again,
Carl, if you're still listening in this show, find a way to get Devonta Adams from him.
You know what, man? I mean, I don't want to call it collusion. But it is collusion.
I mean, if you're the one saying it, though, how is it collusion? You're the one offering Carl to be the intermediary here.
Because at the same time, you're thinking about it. So the fact that you thought about it and somehow got it out there, because you probably provoked me to do it. So you're the one who's going to jail, not me.
Look, all I'm saying is Josh Jacobs is making the rest of my running backs look bad.
A lot of tackles.
He's making the rest of my running backs look bad right now. He is still on the trade block for those that are interested, because at this point, if I'm going to be a 0 running back squad, I want to be a true 0 running back squad, and I can't have an RB8 on my lineup, RB7, wherever he is right now. I can't have him making everybody look bad.